I lied about my religion to be with my high school sweetheart. Now, after nearly a decade together and a church wedding, he is. I was 15 when I started dating the boy who would later become my husband. We were high school sweethearts, cliché, maybe, but it felt like fate at the time. He was kind, thoughtful, and openly Christian. We ran in a group of friends who were largely affiliated with the church in one way or another. Not in an overly strict, conservative kind of way, just the sort of people who went to youth group, volunteered during holidays, and prayed before meals without making it weird. At that time, I wasn't religious. I had been baptized as a baby, yes, and my family would attend church when my grandparents were in town, but my parents themselves were more culturally Christian than anything else. Privately, I had identified as an atheist for as long as I can remember. I didn't feel any deep connection when I sat in the pews. It all felt more like going through the motions for the sake of family harmony. But when I was 15 and crushing hard on a boy who seemed to glow when he talked about God, I made a decision that still haunts me. I lied. I said I was Christian. I didn't do it maliciously. I wasn't trying to trick him, exactly. I just wanted to be close to him. And I believed, naively, that I could maybe become a believer over time. That if I just showed up at church enough, prayed often enough, eventually I'd feel something stir inside me. Something real. At first, the lie was small. I nodded in agreement when he mentioned God in passing. I told little stories that made it sound like church had always been a bigger part of my life than it had. When he invited me to youth group, I went. I didn't understand all the sermons, but I sat through them, smiled, and told him I enjoyed them afterward. I even started reading the Bible on my own. At first because I thought it might help me catch up, and then because I hoped it would click one day. That I'd feel the presence everyone around me talked about with such certainty and joy. We dated through high school, then college. He never wavered in his faith. In fact, it deepened. He volunteered at church camps, got involved in community outreach, and led small group discussions for young adults. He never pressured me to be more religious than I was already pretending to be, but the expectation was always there. And I kept up the act. I had to. By that point, we'd built so much of our relationship around God, around shared belief, that the idea of tearing it down by confessing the truth seemed impossible. There were moments I almost told him. One night during college, we were lying on the grass looking at the stars after youth service, and he said something about how grateful he was to have found someone who shared his faith. My stomach dropped. I wanted to tell him right then and there, but he looked so happy, so peaceful. And I told myself again, maybe one day I will believe. Maybe I'll grow into it. I didn't. After college, he got a stable job, and I started working too. Our lives meshed together more and more. We talked about marriage often. He was never one for casual dating. He told me that from the start. And the fact that we'd lasted all those years was, to him, a sign that God had brought us together for a purpose. He proposed at the end of 2022. It was perfect. A snowy evening, twinkling lights, a picnic set up in the park with our favorite songs playing from a speaker. I said yes without hesitation, and I meant it. I loved him. I still do. But even as I stared at the ring on my finger, a dull panic settled in my chest. I had carried this lie for years. Could I carry it for a lifetime? I told myself it was too late. That if I told him now, it would feel like a betrayal so big it would overshadow everything else. So I kept quiet. We got married last year in a stunning cathedral. His whole family was glowing. My grandparents wept with joy. My own parents, though more low-key about it all, told me how proud they were. It was beautiful and painful, because I stood up there in front of our families before God, or at least in the presence of people who believed he was watching, and I repeated vows I wasn't sure I could spiritually uphold. I've been married for over a year now, and the weight of the lie is heavier than ever. It's not just a teenage fib anymore. It's the foundation of my marriage. And it's a foundation built on sand. I try not to think about it too much, but it creeps into everything. When he asks if I want to lead Grace, I feel a twist in my chest. When he talks about raising our future children in the church, I smile and nod, but my mind spirals. I don't want to lie to my children. I don't want them to feel like I did, pressured to believe something just to fit in. I want them to have the freedom to explore and decide for themselves. But how do I raise them that way when I'm still lying to their father? And the thing is, he doesn't believe in divorce. Not for any reason short of infidelity or abuse. I know that if I told him the truth, he wouldn't just leave me. He'd feel stuck. Betrayed, sure, but also bound by his beliefs to stay and try to fix things. That's the worst part. I don't want him to stay out of obligation. I don't want him to feel like I robbed him of a future with someone who truly shared his faith. I don't know what to do. Some days I consider telling him everything and just letting the chips fall. Other days I convince myself that continuing the lie is the kinder choice, that it protects him from pain. But deep down, I know that's just me rationalizing my own fear. I love him. He's my best friend, my partner. And yet, I feel completely alone in this one thing that has come to define our entire relationship. Maybe I should have been honest when I was 15. Maybe I should have come clean before the proposal. Maybe. The regrets pile up. I don't know how long I can keep living this way. But I also don't know how to tear down the life we've built. I don't want to lose him. But I don't want to lose myself either. It's been almost 2 months since I first admitted, if only to myself, that I couldn't keep pretending anymore. And now I've finally told him. I don't think I'd planned it. There was no perfect moment. No grand lead-up. Just a quiet evening, and a silence I couldn't bear anymore. I looked at the man I've loved since we were teenagers and felt like a stranger sitting next to him. That's when I knew I had to tell the truth, even if it broke everything. So I told him. I told him everything. That I had lied at the start of our relationship. That I wasn't religious then. That I'm not religious now. That I don't believe in God, and never truly have. That I tried over the years to force belief into myself. I went to church with him. I sang hymns, I held his hand in prayer, and I nodded along when he spoke about our future, our children, our faith, our purpose. But it was all performance. Not out of cruelty or manipulation, but because I loved him. Because I wanted to be who he wanted. Because I thought maybe, someday if I acted the part long enough, it would become real. It never did. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He didn't even speak at first. He just sat there in stunned silence. He looked hollow. I could feel something heavy shifting in the air between us. Just to clarify something from my last post, he isn't Orthodox, he's Protestant. Back in high school, I remember how he'd get passionate about theology, about truth, about grace. I used to chime in, say I agreed more with Protestantism than the tradition I supposedly came from. That was another layer of the lie. When we got married in that church, he believed I had converted. Fully. Genuinely. He never doubted it, not even once. Until now. After I told him, he got up, grabbed a few things, and left. He went to his parents' house. That weekend felt like living in a vacuum. He didn't text, didn't call, didn't even let me know if he was okay. I spent those days in limbo, fluctuating between dread and guilt, tears and nausea. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just kept wondering if I had finally destroyed something that had been fragile for years. On Tuesday, he came back. He didn't rush in. He didn't embrace me. He sat down across from me, looked me in the eyes, and said he wanted to talk. He told me that he was heartbroken, but not because I wasn't Protestant. Not even because I wasn't a believer. The thing that crushed him the most was that I had lied. For so long. That he had built this life, this future, this marriage, on a version of me that never existed. He said it felt like waking up in someone else's story, like everything he thought was true had slipped away all at once. He told me he didn't know if it was me he loved or the idea of me. That the trust he held onto so tightly had been fractured in ways he wasn't sure could be repaired. I asked him what he wanted. Whether he wanted space, or to leave, or to work through this. But he didn't have an answer. He said he didn't want to lose me. That he had dreamed of building a family with me, raising kids in the church, sharing Sunday mornings, talking theology over breakfast, leading with faith. But that dream was built on a foundation I'd quietly chipped away at for years. And now, all that's left is rubble. I suggested counseling, marriage therapy, anything that might help us process this in a safe, constructive way. But he said he wasn't ready. He told me about his childhood, how his parents dragged him through therapist after therapist, each one trying to salvage a broken marriage that had already bled out. He said he's scared that counselors will try to fix us without asking if we should be fixed. Still, he hasn't left. We sleep in the same bed. We eat at the same table. We talk sometimes. But there's a sadness in his eyes that wasn't there before. An emotional distance that feels impossible to close. And every time he looks at me, I wonder if he's trying to see the version of me he thought he married, or the one I actually am. I told him that if we do have children, I'd be willing to raise them in the faith. That I'd keep going to church with him, the way I always have. That I'm not trying to change his beliefs. I respect them deeply. I always have. But I can't keep pretending. And I worry that doing so, especially now, would only plant more seeds of resentment. For both of us. I love him. Desperately. I would do almost anything to help him want to stay. But I also know that real love has to be built on truth. That the most painful part of this entire experience isn't just what I did to him, it's what I denied us both by never giving him the full story. By assuming I could be enough without being honest. By not trusting that he deserved to make his own choices based on truth. I don't know what comes next. Some days I feel hopeful. Like maybe, just maybe, we can rebuild, not the dream we had, but a new one. One shaped by honesty and mutual respect, even if we don't share faith. Other days, I feel like I'm watching him drift further away, and I don't know how to reach him anymore. What I do know is this. Lies don't disappear with confession. They leave a residue. A damage. A silence that takes time to fill. But I'm still here, ready to put in the work if he is. And if he isn't, if this ends here, then at least I can say I finally gave him the truth. The real me. Not the version I thought he wanted, but the person who loved him enough to come clean. And maybe that's a kind of faith, too. The belief that truth, even when painful, is always better than a lifetime of pretending. Just a piece of advice after realizing this situation. First, be kind to yourself. You carried the weight of a difficult truth for years, and while lying isn't right, your decision to come clean took courage. You didn't do it to hurt him. You did it because you want an honest, lasting relationship. That matters. Now, the most important thing is patience. His world was shaken by your confession, not because of your beliefs, but because trust was broken. Rebuilding trust doesn't happen overnight. Let him sit with his emotions. He needs space to process not just your truth, but what it means for the relationship he thought he had. Continue being open. If he asks questions, answer truthfully, even if the answers are uncomfortable. Make it clear that while you don't believe in God, you deeply respect his faith. Acknowledge the harm caused by your silence, but also remind him that you love him, not in spite of who he is, but because of it. You don't have to pretend anymore, but you can show him that your love isn't dependent on shared faith. If you're willing to raise children with exposure to his beliefs and support his spiritual life, tell him so, but be honest about your boundaries. A healthy marriage can only survive if both people feel safe, being fully themselves. Finally, counseling can help, but maybe not right now. Individual therapy might be a first step for you to unpack the guilt and pressure you've carried, and for him to process the betrayal he feels. When he's ready, couples therapy could be a space not to fix the marriage, but to explore whether and how to move forward. Healing takes time, but love grounded in honesty, even when it shakes everything, has a better chance of surviving than a love built on pretending. You're not alone. And this doesn't have to be the end. Only a new beginning.